Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar. We have a awesome webinar this morning, and I'm going to introduce Sandy, who's going to kick us off. Thank you, Sandy.
Great, awesome. Thanks so much. We have limited time here today, but I'm so excited to dive into this topic. Today, we're going to be digging deep into this topic of AI and growth marketing. And before we dive in, just wanted to actually provide a quick introduction to who you'll be hearing from today. So we're going to pull up our speaker backgrounds here. Wonderful. So hopefully you're in the right place. For the next 45 minutes that we have here today, we're going to be talking all about our direct experiences and how AI is changing the growth marketing playbook. And we're joined today by none other than some of the greatest experts in some of the fastest growing companies and startups out there today. Firstly, we have Makiel, who is a growth marketing leader at Airbnb and has been there for quite a period of time. I had originally a conversation with Makiel where we started to dive into how AI is changing some of his own workflows, and I'm super excited for him to share some of those learnings today. And we also have Parker, who is head of growth at OpusClip. Now, OpusClip, as many of you know, is one of my favorite products. In fact, here at UC Berkeley, we've used OpusClip for our social content before, and today we get to get a behind the scenes view and dig a little bit deeper into how Parker and his team are thinking about growing that business. And then for myself, I'm an instructor here at UC Berkeley. I'm actually teaching a growth marketing masterclass that covers topics like how we should be thinking about and using AI in growth marketing, and more broadly have some growth experience at companies like Meta, Pinterest, Descript, so on and so forth. And with that, let's actually dive in. So before we dive into today's discussion, I want to set a little bit of context. If you look at the marketing landscape today, we essentially are seeing something really interesting where when I have conversations with my students and the founders who I'm advising on growth marketing strategies, there's this overwhelming sentiment that maybe marketing has dramatically changed, right? A lot of the things that we used to do that used to work are not working anymore. So, one question I get is growth marketing really dead? And has growth marketing been killed by AI, so to speak? And it turns out that this is not necessarily true. In fact, we're seeing some of the world's fastest growing startups exist in this era. And our observation broadly is that with AI, marketing is moving even faster than it has before in the past, driving our ability to drive power law outcomes for growth and distribution in many different ways. If you look at the landscape even more broadly, it turns out that 69% or most of marketing teams have already integrated AI into their operations. For the teams that are using generative AI specifically, 71% are weekly active users. And there are tons of use cases that are being well adopted, like content creation, writing copy, using AI to brainstorm and inspire different types of ideas. But at the same time, that's being balanced by this fear that 60% of us fear that AI could actually take over our jobs or parts of our jobs. And more than half of us are worried that AI content could actually harm our brand through different types of biases, hallucinations, plagiarism, and different types of value misalignment. And then lastly, 67% of us are saying that we're not actually adequately using AI because we're not trained and educated well enough on the types of tools and the ways to use them. So there's still a barrier to adoption. And with all of that, let's dive actually straight into the heart and the meat of all of this. What are we actually doing in this age of AI? The first place that I want to start is actually by learning from our experts around the specific growth marketing tactics that maybe used to work before, but have changed or don't work anymore. And with that, I want to actually start the conversation with Parker. What are some of the tactics that you used to see, and how have they changed over time?
Yeah, thanks, Sandy, and thanks for having me generally. So that's a good question. I think the constant, just with the emergence of AI and LLMs and everything that entails, is the theme you've been hitting on. I think every strategy and every tactic is changing to a degree. One that I personally am passionate about is really important to us at OpusClip, and I've spent probably hundreds of hours contemplating on at this point over the past year is SEO. And I think SEO is also kind of the easy target that everyone likes to talk about and focus on. So hope that I'm not repeating strategies that people are already aware of or familiar with, but I do want to talk about how I think SEO is changing broadly, and the approach to SEO, the strategy that I personally am trying to push us towards at OpusClip and advise others on as well. So I think just to summarize where we're at with like SEO as a tactic and how AI has affected it is we've all seen like the provocative posts on LinkedIn showing HubSpot's traffic has kind of fell off. I think Zapier is another one, but they're kind of recovering. So we've seen this trend that a lot of companies who are built on SEO are struggling in the last year or so. And the reason behind that is just the general shift towards people using LLMs to answer a lot of questions they have that are informational in nature. And also Google starting to like shift the search engine itself more towards the direction of like an LLM like ChatGPT. Because we've seen the implementation of AI overviews. Google's now trying to answer most of your questions in that top fold without showing the normal list of results. And I think last week or the week before, they just launched AI mode, which is kind of like it's another tab over in the search engine, and it's basically perplexity, right? So I think that the trend that I've seen, I think everyone's seen, is that the old generation of companies like HubSpot and some others, though they're still relevant and killing it, they really built their SEO on answering informational type of questions that people have. Where I think SEO is kind of shifting towards, and this is what I would advise anyone listening to start to frame SEO around in your own mind, is focus less on answering questions that are something easy for Gemini or ChatGPT to answer, and instead look at your product and look at what is the unique thing that your product, or if you're a service-based business, your service can do for users that can't be commoditized by an LLM, right? And so I'll put this in the example of Opus Clip. People can search, how do I grow on social media? And Google's going to want to answer that through an AI overview for that user, because it's just informational in nature, right? But anything that's like a more bottom of funnel keyword or query that is reflective of a thing our product can do that Google search cannot do in an AI overview, that's where you're going to show up. That's where Google's going to show listings. You're going to get clicks back to your website. So for Opus Clip, right? People, if they're Googling turn long video into clips, an AI overview can't do that. Google has no choice but to link to us and to show the traditional results. And we're going to get clicks because that's something our product is differentiated in and we uniquely can do. It's not commoditized. And I don't think it will be for a while. So whatever company you're at, I would think, how are you differentiated? What are the lower funnel jobs to be done that you can serve searchers for right here, right now, that they're looking to accomplish right here, right now, and orient your efforts around that first and foremost. And then I think you can expand and try to go more middle and top of funnel in the SEO you're producing. But that would be my guidance for the short term for folks.
Parker, that resonates so much. If I can maybe borrow a strain of what you're saying here, this is only one example, but what you're suggesting is that a lot of informational searches, people want quick answers to them oftentimes, right? And with the power of LLMs, whether it's a search engine or an AI chat, they can quickly surface that information to a searching user. Whereas what a lot of product providers, companies can do in this scenario is to actually bring that value directly closer to the customer. So you're essentially trying to bridge that intent with the actualized action and value that somebody cares for much faster. And the more that you can figure out what are the areas in which you uniquely have the ability to do that, the more likely it is that you won't be competed away, if you will, by informational searches or Google, Perplexity, Gemini, ChatGPT, etc. Just providing a generic answer that doesn't necessarily allow you to surface your brand.
Exactly. And if I can just spend a minute doubling down on that and actually making it a little more actionable for people, you can use AI content. I think there's a common misconception that Google doesn't like AI content. It detects if something is written by AI content on your website and dings you for it. They actually don't. They actually just look for spam. What they consider spam is low value, lazy content that doesn't provide the user what they want. So I think to double down on the point you just made, Sandy, you can distill your products down to all the hundreds or thousands of unique jobs to be done that it can serve. So again, in an Opus Clips example, turn any long video into a TikTok, into an Instagram reel, into a LinkedIn video. And nowadays, you can produce enough content on your website to have standalone URLs and rank for every single thing someone could possibly be searching for your website. That again, Google has no choice but to show you for, because they can't do it with AI mode or AI overview. So nowadays you can use AI in creative ways to publish SEO content in a really expansive fashion that ranks for all of those things that people are looking to uniquely use your product to do. So I encourage people to try that out. And as long as the quality of what you're producing is high enough and it's giving users what they want, that conversion rate is high, Google is going to want to rank you. They're not going to look at the fact that you used AI to produce it and for some bias, bias against you and not rank it.
Exactly. That's a very actionable tip. You heard it here for folks. It's basically you can use AI generated content, just make sure it's actually delivering value to the end customers here. With that, Makiel, let's transition over to you. Can you also share with us a growth tactic or strategy that you've used in the past and how it's changed over time?
Yeah, but let me maybe first, one thing that Parker said that I really liked is that we're now going from like old school organic SEO to the AI overviews. And we actually don't really know exactly what the LLMs are using to create those overviews on our page, on our product. This opens up a whole new workload of experimentation, which I love. So one part that comes for me is now, what kind of content are the LLMs actually using? So we're starting to use like these AI tools that scrape AI content on a daily basis, and we can see where content is starting to come from, which means that now we can actually start experimenting with SEO snippets on our page to better target the LLMs and all the redirects that are now coming from those, which I think is just extremely interesting because experimentation is one of the things I love. The reason this came up is because we saw that at some points the AI overview on Google started serving policies from Airbnb from like 5 years ago, which were like hidden somewhere on the page. So we just knew like we had to work on that. So that's just inside. Yeah, another tactic that I think, so I'm mostly focused on paid search. Something that is kind of obvious and it just naturally happens through Google is that they started using AI in some of their match types. So before broad match, the new broad match came out, it was for us very important that we would go as granular as we could. Like we wanted to have exact match, so we had full control over where keywords show up. But it would kind of miss user intent in a sense that Google knows more about the users. So when broad match got introduced, which is the first match type that actually uses AI, we no longer really need to dive into that deep, which means that we can delete, let's say, a lot of our accounts to very manageable accounts, because if we use that broad match type, we will get users that actually have the intent to book without using exact match. What that exactly means is that in the past we had like vacation rental San Francisco, and if somebody searched for that, we would show up. We obviously still do. So everything that was directly related to our product, we would show up for. But nowadays, Google knows that Sandy has been searching for holidays to New York in March, and we know that she's going to be staying in Airbnbs, and we know when she's going to go exactly. So and then at some point she searches for New York, which is not a keyword that we would buy because it's very expensive. But because of broad match, we would now show up because Google knows the intent is there to start staying in New York around that time in an Airbnb. So suddenly this entire library of keywords that we would never bid on and that sometimes not even make sense, we are now eligible for, and we actually see them convert. There was one great example that there was a city, I think it was like some city in the Midwest in the US, and people started searching for, I want to go to the beach at the Pacific Ocean in whatever city in Arizona it was, which obviously we would never book because it makes sense. But because Google apparently knew better what the user wanted than what the user wanted, they actually showed an ad from us and they converted in the end. So it was very, very effective for us.
That's really interesting. And Makiel, can I also maybe extend that and ask you about, it sounds like a lot of the intent determination is being automated away, if you will, by Google's methodology here. Can you speak to some of the even more automated ad types like Performance Max, for instance? How do you think about it? How does your team utilize it? And how do we make sense of sort of these types of AI bidding strategies, if you will?
Yeah, so AI bidding strategies I love. Like I love having broad match in combination with Target OS because it's basically their two most advanced product in their category, which they just work really well if utilized correctly. Performance Max is quite a different conversation for me personally. There's two reasons for that. Is one, I love the data and I love transparency. And Performance Max, as I'm sure most people know, is not really giving us that, even though I heard they might be changing a little bit of the insights. The second thing is that Airbnb, we are very strict on our brands. how it shows up, where it shows up, like what channels, whatever content it shows up to. Performance Max doesn't necessarily give us that that control. Like up until shortly, we couldn't even control what, for instance, a display ad would look like if we use Performance Max. So for us, most things around Performance Max are really working with the Google product team on making it work for us before we can even try it out. Now, and as some people might have read, there's new Performance Max like products coming. I'm not sure how much I can say about that because we are under NDAs with them, so I don't know how much is public and what's not. But like, there's new products coming that will be better and will be more transparent, and we will have more control. But like right now, I'm not a big fan of black box solutions, and this is like the most mysterious product that they have to me.
So it sounds like Performance Max or even some of these other types of automated, Google bidding strategies, they're very useful. But one of the challenges increasingly for marketers is there's this black box, right? And it's increasingly harder to understand what's working, who the customers are, and therefore it's tough for us as marketers to make decisions around these or, truly trust the data and the results that we're seeing. So thanks so much for sharing that. I want to actually perhaps transition here to a second topic, which is understanding how you all use AI tools in your own workflows. And perhaps a question that is really top of mind for marketers today is, how do we pick the right tools to use? There are literally hundreds of tools that launch on a weekly, on a monthly basis. So, when you and your team is shopping for tools, what is the primary consideration and what is that shopping process? Would love to just, kind of hear what are some quick ways for people to think about the process of adopting and shopping for AI tools. Let's start with Machiel.
Cool, thanks. Yeah. So for me, the most important thing around AI tools, but tools in general, is like we need to be solving a problem. Like I'm not going to be adopting an AI tool just because I want to tell people that we have AI tools. So when I'm thinking about what do I need to solve, is AI the right tool to solve this, or is it something we can traditionally do? So that's basically my first question that I have. Once we really figure out what we're trying to solve, I'm very old school. I'll make some scorecards. I'll try to figure out exactly what we're trying to figure out. I'll give them weighted scores, and then I'll just go talk to people and figure out like what is the best product for us. Very objectively, we look at the final score, and that's going to be the product that we'll try out with. A consideration I also always have is we need to make sure that we have the requirements to actually implement the tool. And what that means is if I'm going to be using an AI tool, I need to have good data. If I don't have good data, like why would I even use it? The second thing is we will probably need to integrate it. So do I have the tech resources? Like we share our engineering resources, which means that I need to make sure that I have prioritization, I have business impact, and I can actually work with the other channels, with the other parts of the company on getting these resources secured. Because if I pick a tool and we're going to have to integrate some API connection, and I can't do that, then basically I'm not just paying the next 6-12 months for a tool that I'm not going to be able to use just because we can't integrate it. Yeah. So another thing that I always think about is sorry, Sandy, for interrupting you.
No
but that's like, it's not only thinking about what solves the problem, but in my job, I also need to think about what the problem will look like 2 years down the line. So that's another thing that I'm thinking about. Okay, well, this is what the work stream is right now. In the future, what part of this work stream will be done by me and what part of the work stream will be done by potentially an AI or some other tool. I will try to prioritize that, what brings the team actually further.
Mm. That makes sense. It sounds like, Machiel, you and your team have a relatively robust process, I would say. You're really kind of forward thinking. You're thinking about usage today. You're thinking about value today. You're also thinking about how does it integrate with everything else that we're using. Parker, on your end of things, your team size is quite different than Airbnb. Does your team have a process similar to Machiel's, or is it different?
Yeah, I think being a startup, I'd say and it certainly helps if the product in question has a free plan or a trial. I would say, given that we're a startup, we sometimes bias a little more towards wanting to test things out, even if we haven't fully fleshed it out yet and evaluated all the alternatives. We try to have like a little bit more of a bias towards, we'll just pick it up and try it out and see if it passes the sniff test. One thing I will say, kind of reinforcing Mahil's point is, well, two things actually. I think selecting the right tools. I think we're really fortunate nowadays that there is just so much conversation around AI and enthusiasm around AI that nowadays I feel like if there's a tool that I might be interested in, I can go on YouTube or maybe X, and I can almost search for like an exact tutorial of someone using that tool for the exact nuance that I'm trying to use it for. Because nowadays everyone, if they try an AI tool they want to make like a YouTube tutorial about it because they know other people are going to look for it and they can, get some attention. So we're really blessed, I think, that nowadays I feel like you can find a proof point online that an AI tool will work for what you're trying to do in almost any case, unless it's like, if you found a tool on X that just launched like last night, because that's typically where you find those on is X, unless you found like the newest tool that hasn't really been stress test yet. I think there's a lot of really easy to find social proof out there today to help you kind of sift out the quality from the noise. And just the last point I'll make, which is I think what Mahil was implying to, one thing that we and I are looking for when we're selecting AI tools are looking for tools that seem to be, like from an engineering standpoint, prioritizing interoperability. Like it's clear that the tool, like early on, they're either making efforts towards building an API or building an integration with like Zapier or Make or N8N. Like it looks like philosophically, the tool is very forward in terms of building interoperability among other tools. Because I think like down the road, we're going to start to plug in a lot of overlap with other tools, other LLMs we're using. So I think it's a good idea to pick tools now that are prioritizing that, and that seems on their roadmap, than ones that are kind of not in philosophical agreement with that.
That makes a lot of sense. And, in some ways you're willing to, as a startup, you're willing to test these tools, but at the same time, you're kind of keeping an eye out for how much you can future-proof it, right? Which is, are they opening themselves up? So even if it doesn't work with everything now, like in the future, maybe you have some need to connect it to other tools and the interoperability piece that you mentioned. So I really love that. Parker, I want to dive into a little bit of, what you were talking about earlier. You said this term, whether or not the AI tool passes the sniff test. And I would actually love to define the sniff test, if you will, with both of you here, which is, oftentimes in marketing work or growth marketing work, a lot of the outputs, especially with generative AI, have some kind of creative component to it, right? And as human decision makers here on whether or not it's good enough or good in general, how do we determine whether or not it's going to work or is working? And here I'd love to understand, is it the same metrics that you're measuring around the success of these AI generated outputs? Are there new metrics that you're using? But generally speaking, how are you thinking about measuring success here? And Parker, would love to start with you.
Sure. Yeah. So I think first, let me talk about the sniff test. I think there's no like perfect answer. I think the only comment I'll make on that is, AI it's very frothy. There are a lot of products that promise a lot and deliver on some of that or none of that. The only advice I'd give to people, because I see people fall into this trap all the time, myself included, sometimes, is the sniff test. I think you need to give AI tools, at least in today's landscape, like a little more of the benefit of the doubt and a little more effort up front to test them and to conduct that sniff test before you discard that they either don't work or, were overpromised or whatnot. So one example I'll share, I've since become a huge fan of this company, is Creatify. So if you're familiar with like the AI UGC ad tools, like Icon is a really hot one right now. And then there's ArcAds. Creatify is kind of like the entry-level tool. It's the cheapest. And you can go in and if you try to one-shot it, you try to one-shot an ad with Creatify, the output you're going to get back is like pretty poor. And I've seen a lot of people who do that with Creatify and they're like, this is a scam. It doesn't work. If you give it a little bit of a better prompt about your company and you give it a few more assets, give it some B-roll footage of your product, a couple of video testimonials, and give it that and then run it, the output it gives you is like an order of magnitude better. And that only took you a few more minutes of effort. So give these tools the benefit of the doubt when you're doing that sniff test. And then I think if at that point you're still finding that they're not delivering, I think that, maybe they fail your personal sniff test. The last comment to answer your other question, Sandy, is I think as a startup, I know this is kind of a cop-out answer, but I think our metric for success isn't, when adopting AI tools isn't as quantitative and, formalized, if you will. One thing I encourage people to do though is like treat learning in itself as a success metric. So even if you try out a tool and it didn't deliver in the way you wanted, or it didn't accomplish, what you wanted in the full extent you wanted, like if you learned something in the process and you sharpened your AI skill set just a little bit in the process, consider that a partial victory too. I think that's something we need to all culturally be prioritizing as well when quantifying success.
That's actually a great answer, Parker. It wasn't a cop-out. In fact, the reality is that the 69% of teams who are adopting marketing in their operations, you don't have very definitive quantitative metrics to say, this thing is working necessarily, infinitely better or 20% better. Although maybe it's different in Machiel's case where, the standards of launching these types of experiments at Airbnb, maybe incrementality is something that you care a lot about. And with that, Machiel, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, even though I fully agree with Parker, from my point of view, my business point of view, it's actually quite different. So when you say we should give the benefit of the doubt, that's just something we cannot necessarily always do. Like, of course, we want to test, and there's not going to be a perfect solution straight away. But we don't we can generate ads that do not fit our brand voice. Like, we cannot put something out there that doesn't fit us because it will show up somewhere and people will notice it and it will come out. And even though I do agree learnings are also great outcomes, we are big enough to have other people, I guess, maybe do these learnings for us. Because when we introduce a tool, like it needs to be perfect. Like, it's that easy. Like, we don't want anything that is less than that. So when I look at tools, then it's basically what I said earlier. Like, what is the problem we're trying to solve? What are normally the KPIs that are around this problem? So let's say we want to, maybe a better example, we want to optimize CTR through some sort of AI tool. Then that will also be exactly the KPI that we will be testing the tool on, because that is in the end the future state. And if the future state means we need to be better at it, then this tool needs to be better at it than our current solution. Yeah, so I guess for us, it's all a little bit more robust is a very positive way to say it, but maybe also a little bit slower than what you can do in a startup.
That's actually a really helpful perspective, right? Because both our experts here today have growth experiences at different size of companies. And on the startup side of things, totally open to having, end users and the team try out different things. And then you have this kind of window of opportunity, if you will, to experiment and learn and see if it will actually, work for the workflows, the marketing workflows that we care about. And then on, perhaps the larger company end of things, there are already existing systems and data and things that are working, and you can't necessarily risk just trying little things here and there and breaking what is already working, right? So these are actually both really helpful perspectives because, we have marketers in the webinar today coming from both types of experiences. And then just to maybe talk about the AI tooling aspect a little bit further here, what are both of your thoughts on the role that AI should be playing in the creativity component of it? Let's talk about that a little bit, without necessarily getting into how we quantify whether the creative is good or bad. How do you both use AI in that creativity component, whether it's for your own workflows around ideation or brainstorming, or even for generating those outputs here? What role should AI play and how have you used that so far? And Machiel, let's start with you.
Yeah. So I think two of the main things that I think they should play a role in is already two things that you mentioned. I think the first one is the brainstorming, the ideation phase. Like I use LLMs and just like I talk back and forth with them. Like just they're my partner that always has time and that's always there. And it goes through every possible opportunity out there. And it talks about other examples it can find. And it's not only about creative, but it's also about like foundational things around, I don't know, data or what kind of tooling we should be using, something we talked about. The other part is we're a global program. We have literally hundreds of thousands of assets out there, which at some point were all created by humans, which was a very non-scalable process, very prone to human error. In the future, I hope that AI will help us build this 80% output. And then we'll have teams like localization or also the growth marketing team make it perfect. So I feel like AI is going to be it's going to make our lives easier, faster, and better. But we will still be the people that are going to make sure that the last 20, the last 10% is going to be perfect and really fits the brand. I don't see a future necessarily well, maybe I will see a future, in the far future, where they can generate everything perfectly because they have learned our brand of voice. They know what we put out there. They know what our mission and vision is. But like right now, for me, it's really getting that first push before we make it perfect.
Thanks for sharing that. I agree with that perspective a lot, actually. One of the analogies that I like to use is I kind of call it, growth marketers eventually will become something of an orchestrator or a conductor, right? So the orchestra itself is kind of autonomous in the sense that they have their skills and they have their places and the execution happens, right? But someone needs to determine what we're playing, how fast it goes, and then ultimately control and manage the overall quality of the output there. So that resonates a lot with me. And Parker, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, and by the way, I think everything Mahil said, absolutely agree. I think that the best case scenario is that, yeah, AI can kind of carry the 80% of the heavy lifting, and we can kind of sit back and just critique and get it to perfection. I think the one area that I think I found AI be really valuable to us and myself during brainstorming is using AI to kind of apply more of like an analysis step in my brainstorming process. So I think, like, I remember when I first started in my career, and I even think to, like, I don't know if anyone's ever watched Mad Men, like the Madison Avenue advertisers from the 60s. Like when they would brainstorm and they would come up with campaign ideas, it would always be like them in a room kind of just talking to each other and smoking cigarettes, and just anything they come up with was just like a pure concoction of their own imagination. I think what I see now, when I'm brainstorming, let's use social media ads for an example. If me or my team are brainstorming social media ad ideas, like concepts, scripts for short form video ads, we will get the help of an LLM to analyze what's working for other companies outside of our industry even, and draw inspiration from that in that early stage of brainstorming. Because nowadays, you can find 10 video ads you like from brands that you're a fan of, and you can give them to an LLM and ask it to transcribe the videos and ask it to summarize for you, like, how much social proof did they use in their ad, or like what was kind of the selling point? Did they speak to the product as like a painkiller or a vitamin? You can ask AI to like do some of this analysis work for you, and then it can feed that back to you, and you can use that earlier on in your brainstorming process. I think that's a huge shift that more and more people are using it for, myself included, and that can really save you time in brainstorming and help you kind of crowdsource more of your ideas in that process. So that's one recommendation I would give.
Very helpful. Love how tactical that is. I'm sure the audience can apply that right away. I want to actually make sure that we have some time for Q&A. Before we dive in, we started this conversation talking about how even though a lot of us are already using AI, we can actually already see that the tactics and the strategies we use from company to company is so different. At UC Berkeley here, we actually have an upcoming growth marketing masterclass where you'll get to hear from, myself and more experts in this topic with the most up-to-date growth marketing curriculum and how to use AI within that. And the program kicks off in May. And, we have actually a special code here, AI Web 20, for 20% off enrollment. So be sure to check that out. Feel free to keep this QR code and this bit.ly link. But with that, actually, let's dive into our Q&A here. So we have a few questions in the comments here. The first question I actually want to start out with is Vivek and some of the other participants want to know what some of the specific tools that you both use are, or maybe more broadly, what are some of the categories or types of tools that you are using in your work and growth? Parker or Makiel, feel free to take this question.
I can tell you about my favorite my favorite tool right now. So we're a very seasonal business, and every country has its own seasonality, and all of our bidding, so basically the ROI that we will achieve eventually, is very relying on our communication and our tech setup. Basically, monitoring this tech setup is difficult because we have like huge data warehouses. Like, it's all very complicated, and especially with regional seasonality, it's also kind of hard to figure out what is an anomaly and what is not an anomaly. So let's say on December 26th, I suddenly see spend explode in a certain country. Is this something that should cause concern or not? Probably not, because the 26th in travel is notoriously a search in search terms, basically. So we have AI tools that basically learn seasonality on a regional, on a country level basis, and they take into account the amount of spend we're trying to spend, and then basically figure out what is an anomaly and what is not. Last year, we didn't have this, and basically we get a lot of false positives that basically leads to ignoring emails or ignoring alerts, and somehow you actually miss the issue. Where nowadays, with a way more advanced AI solution, this is basically no longer the case. When an alert comes in, I know this is something we actually need to look into, and I will probably have to go with my engineers and figure out what is happening. That is my favorite tool right now.
Great, awesome. And we're going to try to get through as many of these questions as possible. So thank you, Machiel. The next question, maybe Parker, you want to share some thoughts here from Nick. Any thoughts on AI and growth marketing for very early stage companies?
Yeah, very early stage. So I'm going to assume like maybe we're talking like a seed stage startup. Yeah, I think like fundamentally what's really important when you're like a very early stage startup, as you've probably studied up on, is like the best advice is to try to find the one growth channel that'll take you to the next level. There's a temptation to try like SEO and ads and an affiliate program and like 10 other different strategies, and you're just going to get stretched thin and not really give any of them a good shot. So on the one hand, I'd say try to experiment quickly and crack that one channel that's going to work for you. And then I would focus on keeping it really simple, finding one. So like if you find that social ads are positive for you, I would just try to get really good with Creatify. Like pick one tool and get really good with it. Or if you find that like, SEO is that's not going to be what works for you as like a very early stage startup, but then try to get really good with like Surfer or another AI SEO tool. I'd try to keep it simple, be an expert of like one rather than a master of none. And another thing that's underrated is like get super good with ChatGPT. I think there's like, you can accomplish so much with just a single LLM like ChatGPT. You can do image generation. They have like Operator now. So I think that's also underrated, is getting super, super good at just one of the top LLMs and trying to accomplish as much as you can with that. So that would be kind of keep it simple, stupid would kind of be my advice for using AI for very early stage startups.
Great recommendations. And then a question that both of you may have a perspective on, since you're both search experts here as well. A LinkedIn user asked, what about the increasing volume of partner backlinks in order to drive brand credibility and the likelihood of appearing on an LLM response? What are your thoughts or experiences perhaps with that?
I'm going to give this to you, Parker. Sorry.
Okay, I'll try to take this one because this is something I'm kind of wrestling with too myself. I'm trying to figure out the best way to do this. So yeah, to their comment, I think that backlinks, your link profile is like one of the more important factors to how you're going to show up in LLMs and the frequency at which you will. So I think there are tools out there for this. Like Respana is one. It's Respana.com. You can do at scale. They make it pretty easy to do at scale backlink outreach. I think that another thing I'd recommend is like, you could maybe cut to the chase a little faster and like pursue quality over quantity. If you try, like, there are tools now that may be out of your budget, unless you're like at a company, like Profound is one, which is like it's kind of like Ahrefs or SEMrush, but for your appearance in LLM. So you can actually single out like, what are the single articles and publications that are driving, their backlinks are driving the most visibility for other companies. So if you want to really focus on quality over quantity, you could use a tool like Profound to single out a hit list of top priority publications that you want to outreach to. And then I'd go and hit up their publisher on like LinkedIn and email them and, send them a Venmo payment or something with your message in it. That's not something I'd actually recommend, but a couple different approaches you could take there to try to get backlinks.
Awesome. Those are really tactical tools that the audience here can check out. Amazing. Let's move on to our next question here. We have a question from Sakib, and Sakib is sharing this observation that these newer AI companies, like the ones that we showed on screen when we started today's conversation, are achieving such revenue scales with supposedly a much, much smaller teams. And Wanted to brainstorm, are there any ideas around what they're doing to make that happen? You know, are the results mostly AI driven? Are they using traditional distribution? While we may not know exactly what it is that these companies are using specifically, but any broad observations perhaps around how you know, today's AI native companies and newer companies are really thinking about growth and distribution.
I think most of these companies, I don't think they revolutionized growth marketing, and that's why they grow this fast. I think they managed to find a product that is really needed in a time that everybody's trying to adopt new products. I think the drive behind a huge increase in revenue is probably that they managed to put products out there quicker or features out there quicker that might not have been coded like perfectly with the greatest foundation to scale the rest of life, but they probably use AI tools to generate blocks of code to build their products faster. Most of these products, I actually don't really see that much growth marketing for. The big thing that always happens in San Francisco for everybody who's in San Francisco is that people show up on buses, and that's how you know their ARR grew quite a bit over the last X amount of months. But I don't think they have cracked some new growth marketing that is still a mystery to all of us.
That's a great perspective. Wonderful. We have a more pointed question, Parker. This is for you. Does Opus Clip have an API? Asked by Winston.
Yeah, good question. We do have an API. It's kind of private at the moment. If you fill out the contact form on our website, tell us why you want to use it, right? We'll get back to you and see if we can get you access. At the moment, it's not publicly accessible though, but we're, I think, trying to move in that direction. Yeah, APIs are, you know, once Pandora's, you know, you open up Pandora's box, you gotta, you don't want to rush that. So we're trying to be very careful before we open it up fully.
Great. Thanks so much. We have another question around SEO here from Yulin. Yulin asks, what do you think the future holds then for SEO professionals? You know, we're kind of talking about all of these changes that take place. Will the industry continue to thrive? Will there still be demand for SEO roles? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I actually think the SEO role is going to grow quite a bit. When we look at referral traffic, we actually see that redirects from LLMs, from AI is growing quite a bit. So instead of just thinking about organic traffic as you see it on the organic results on Google or Bing or whatever, you will now just have to start thinking also how LLMs will crawl your data. So I actually think there is a huge future for SEO, much more than there was maybe like 2 or 3 years ago when when there wasn't this perspective yet. So I think it's a very positive outlook.
Great, wonderful. And with that, we're going to head into our final question here, and actually a great way to close out today's discussion. Patrick is asking if there's any way we can get in touch with the guests more broadly. And Machiel and Parker, what's the best way to stay connected with you? Is it to email you? Is it to follow your LinkedIn profile or some other way? Let us know.
Yeah, LinkedIn is perfect.
Yeah, I would say LinkedIn too. I'm pretty responsive over DM. I think if you search Parker Miller, hopefully I appear somewhere towards the middle at least.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. That's all the time that we have for today. It's been a really fun conversation. Gosh, the time really flew by, and there's so many other questions that I have for our guests here, but I really appreciate everybody joining today. As part of joining today, you will also get an email with a link to this as well, so you can rewatch all the amazing snippets that you may have missed in passing here. But it's been great, and hopefully we'll see you at another webinar upcoming. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you, Sandy.
Thanks.